Welcome back to the Live Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Jaclyn Phillips, nice to be reunited with you. We are fresh off of, April, where we both spoke at Swiss Montreal. That was a really fun time. You're the head coach of Team Strong Girls, certified strength and conditioning coach. You've been on the cover of Strong Magazine. There's a lot of dimensions to your career. You're a mental health advocate. It's great to have you on.
Yes, sir. I'm so happy to be back. So happy to be back. Yeah. Well, I guess this is my first time on this one, but nice to be chatting with you again, sir. Yeah.
That is right, because I have a former podcast, a second one that was associated with my online women's strength program, and you were a guest on that one, but not on this pipeline. So it's actually
Oh,
the debut for this listener stream. And
yeah.
as always, I want people to literally go follow you. But first, now, I have a bit of setup for this one. So normally I like asking punchy questions, but this one requires a little bit. So bear with me, guys. So we'll start with a quote: "Be kind because you never know someone's story." Now, also, you don't need to think that just to be kind in general. Be kind regardless. Now, it got me thinking about how mental health struggles are mostly unseen. Okay. It's not always something obvious on the surface. Furthermore, someone might take a look at you and craft this narrative. Okay. You are objectively very tall. You are
Mhm.
athletic. You are objectively very lean. You've been on the cover of a fitness magazine. You have a successful career. And for those who don't know, I very much enjoy your husband, Keith Kincaid. Sorry for throwing that out there. He's been an NHLer for a long time. So you're married to someone who's also had great success in career and sport. And
And
you have a fairly big social media following, and yet you are open about your mental health challenges.
yeah.
Would you care to share your thoughts about all this? This episode is brought to you by Macros First. I've always struggled with nutrition tracking apps, even the slightest hassle or friction, and it breaks my habit. That changed with Macros First. When I tried it, I told my friend, the founder, Jacob, quote, "This is, well, let's just call it a certain other app on steroids. It's the easiest app to use, and it has a free barcode scanner," which, if you use tracking apps, you know this is a really big deal. I recommend Macros First to all my clients and friends, and even had them sponsor my 2024 conference. Here's an example feature I love: auto-calculate food portions. Let's say you've got 30 grams of protein left for the day, and you're thinking, how much chicken breast do I need to hit that? In other apps, you're left guessing serving sizes, hoping you get close to your 30-gram goal. With Macros First, just tell it the target you want to hit, and it tells you exactly how much to eat. No more macro Tetris. Other apps ask, how much do you eat? Macros First also lets you ask, how much should I eat? And while Macros First's premium version is incredible for any user, the basic version, which is nowhere near basic, is free to use. So you can go to either the Apple Store or Google Play to download.
Yeah. Yeah, starting out with a big hitter, eh, Andrew? So I started being more vocal about my personal mental health. It was actually not that long ago. I mean, it was still, I think, it was probably 19. I made my first post where I came out and I really talked about going back on SSRIs and, going back to therapy and just being more open with the fact that I was struggling, that there was something else behind just what I was putting on social media. And the reason I felt the need to do that was because I work one-on-one with women, right? I don't, it's pretty intimate, right? Like I have chats with them, I get to know them, they get to know me. And I realized all of my clients were struggling with things that they thought only they struggled with and that were totally separate from what what I was struggling with or what I was achieving at the time. They thought they couldn't coexist. And I wanted to let people know that I don't want to go out off a limb. Just from my experience and my
Hmm.
experience, successful people often deal with mental health struggles,
Hmm.
right? And I think acknowledging that made it dropped such a barrier between my client that back then. I mean, it was in 20, like I said, 2018, 2019. it drops so many barriers between between my clients and I, and then my community and I. And then I had strangers reaching out, being like, oh my God, thank you for saying this. I had, oh my God, I might cry. I had a girl from high school reach out and say, "Oh my God, I had no idea you were this like perfect person back in high school. You did sports and you were on, student council and you were in musical and choir and it looked like you had this all together." And I came out and explained that I mean, when I first started chatting about it, I've been dealing with mental health issues since childhood. Grade 3 was when I first went to see a therapist. That was my first time. And if I don't know how deep you want me to get into the story, but I was
as comfortable as you feel.
yeah, I was and I share this story. I have a lot of moms reach out to me now about this with their children. I was in grade 3 and I was behind on my homework and I was a very high achiever. And I was so behind on homework that I started telling my parents that I wanted to go visit God in heaven. And so that was very concerning to them. And that's how it all came out and how I was diagnosed with anxiety at a very young age. And that's how I started therapy at 8 years old and then carried on with it pretty much on and off my whole life. But sharing that. And back in the 90s, that was kind of weird, right? Like my parents, I full credit to my parents for recognizing and getting me help, right, with a child psychologist. Because I think there is still a stigma. And back then there certainly was, even to the point where I didn't tell anyone, right? Like I would leave school and walk a couple blocks down the block in St. John to my child psychologist office, right? And go in for my appointment with my therapist. And it was so freeing to like just say that. And it was, I have to be honest, selfishly, it was so nice to have so many people reach out being like, thank you. Like, thank you for like pulling back the curtain. Thank you for showing that, it's not perfection. It's not perfect. And I think in the last couple of years, more and more people are doing that and more, I mean, even like celebrities and, influencers are starting to open up about their mental health. And I think it's a huge, it just breaks down so many barriers for people who think that things aren't achievable for them because they struggle with mental health, right? So yeah, I that was the first. I feel like I went on a tangent there, but you you gave me free rein, so
this is the depth we want to get into, right? Because each person listening is probably going to find their own point at which they're like, "Oh wow, that makes me think of this that I experienced." I hope.
Yeah, and I think at a certain level, right? Like, I mean, and we're not going to go to the world, but the way the world is, like, we're all experiencing some impact, right? In some sense. And I think the more we can be open and honest about that, not necessarily going into the details, but being open and honest about how we're feeling, like I'm feeling off today. And I do tell my clients that. And maybe some coaches aren't, an in-person coach might be different. There's like an energy kind of exchange. But for me, with my clients, it's very easy and nice to kind of be able to say, having a low day,
A quick break from this episode to shout out RP Strength and the RP Hypertrophy app. I have a big confession. I've never used a coach before. I've always auto-regulated my training for decades. But I've known Dr. Mike Israetel and Nick Shaw, the founders of RP, for years, and I'll get behind anything they create, including years of reading their books, consuming their media, attending their seminars, and having them as guests on the show. And I've been using the RP Hypertrophy app now for several months. And several things have happened. It forced me to make smaller and more gradual but better increases in weight volume across time. Like putting 5-pound plates on each side of a leg press. Like, who does that? Never before. Only 45s. It cut out the junk volume. It made my workouts faster and more efficient. I show up with a plan. I didn't have to think about what to do. I feel more accountable having to log my progress. And I don't skip things because I don't feel like it. If hiring a one-on-one coach isn't for you, using the RP Hypertrophy app is the next best thing to manage your gains and to take the guesswork out of your program. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it risk-free, and if you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. I've also got you a $50 US dollar discount, so go to rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP, or go to the link below in the show notes. That's rpstrength.com/coats and use the code COATSRP. For the coaches listening, because it's not often, but sometimes I will go into a day, something's wrong. And it's usually more of an environmental acute thing that is stressful, right? Versus like, what we would call like maybe a mental health day, right?
Mental health.
But I have a policy proactively that I will let clients know, hey, and sometimes I'll be comfortable telling them what happened, or sometimes I'll be like, hey, listen, just today something happened, so I'm a little bit, off. And I proactively let them know that, so that way, because people pick up on the subtlety of our energy. And what do we do naturally? We are egocentric by our nature. So whenever we encounter someone and maybe that person didn't smile at us as they walked by, or just something felt off, and we inherently tend to think, well, what did I do to cause that? Now, I have a little filter that I like throwing at people just to think. It's like how imagine being so, quote, egocentric to think that we have the ability to affect everybody else's and ruin their day. You can use that to try to like train your mind not to think that. That being said, most people don't. So I like to make sure clients understand, hey, this has nothing to do with you. I'm here, I'm present, I'm focused on you. However, if my energy seems a little off, there's a reason, right?
I love that you do that. And I think, and for our coaches listening, I know there's a huge,
Mm,
percentage of our audience that are coaches and, fitness professionals. I feel like there is a certain level of pressure for us to show up
mm.
perfect. There's that pressure to, like you said, not address that, pretend everything's okay. But as you said, people aren't dumb, right? People are going to pick up on that, especially if you see them and talk to them frequently. So in my mind, I'm on the same page as you. Address it, get it out there, and have that conversation. Not, and like going back to what I said, not only is it going to allow them to get out of their own brain on what's going on here today, but it's going to allow them to open up to you more, right? And for you to break that barrier down, and for you to understand them more, why they're struggling that day or maybe having an off day, right? So I think it does. I think it's I love that you have that policy of just being upfront. I think more coaches should be upfront. Again, not spilling our guts, right? There's a level of professionalism there, but having that openness to so that we can have that open conversation. So
Do you ever feel pressure, even though you still talk about the mental health side of things, do you feel pressure to almost be perfect in the way you show up, including balancing that through your media? Or do you find it really freeing to maybe pull back the curtain a bit?
that's a great question. And I think for me personally, I have tried to balance my own mental health, right? And sharing that mental health with my community. And, I think there's a balance in that because I can't always share. And people, if you've ever struggled with mental health, you can't share when you're in those depths, right? Like the deep depths. Not always. Sometimes it is nice. And that's why I say it's a balance because
Mm,
sometimes it's nice to I have that capacity to say, okay, I can reach out to my community right now and share what's going on. I know they're going to appreciate it. And I know I'm going to be able to, receive that support and love from them. Sometimes it's about getting through, sometimes it's about keeping it, getting through that moment and then sharing the struggle and sharing it afterward. I think that's what most people do. And I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine a couple years ago, she's like, "Why don't you share in the depths of it?" And I have posted some posts. I was looking through like a couple of weeks ago. I was like, wow, I used to share crying photos and videos and stuff because it was showing the real stuff. I would be at the gym, and this was when we were in Chicago. Keith, was signed out there, and we spent the entire season in Chicago, and it was so frigid. I'm from New Brunswick, like I know cold, but it was so frigid, and I was isolated. We had no support system. I didn't get home for the holidays to see my family, and I was in the gym just bawling my eyes out. It felt so fake for me to post just a nice little mirror selfie
Mm.
when I was just crying my eyes out, trying to like make sure none of my neighbors in my apartment building saw me in the gym crying. So in that instance, that felt um honest and vulnerable to share. And I know a lot of people do struggle around the holidays. So in that instance, that was to me, that was helpful. It sharing and being really open in that depth. I think part of it was because I was alone. Well, I was with Keith, right? But we didn't. We usually have our family and friends for the holidays, and we have traditions, and all these regular parties we go to, and so reaching out for that online support and just connecting with other people who might have also been, going through a similar low around that time, that was helpful. So I think it's a balance, right, of
Mm.
sharing. And then yeah, oversharing is also,
Mm.
I try, and when I say oversharing, it's like I try to be as open and honest and vulnerable and pull back the curtain as much as possible. But there's other people in my life, and I can't just, right? And not just Keith. Keith's pretty open. He's a pretty public figure, but we have friends and family and those things that impact me, right? I can't necessarily share all that with everyone else. And so
Mm.
that's also a balance, like you said. It's being able to share the feelings and maybe what you're going through without addressing, the what's really going on. So but yeah, I think I would say as a coach, sharing my mental health struggles has been the most freeing thing for me, even in business. And on the
Mm.
business side of things, I think people are really worried as being seen as
Mm.
um what's the word I'm looking for? I've I've gone so far the other way that I forget but it's like I think people
Unstable, fragile,
unstable or unqualified, maybe yeah, like
unprofessional.
unprofessional. Yeah, yeah, I think that's what people fear with that. But we all know, and I think the older I get, the longer we're in this, no matter what your job is, you're human, right? We're
Mm.
we're all we're all human. We're all going through these things. So, it's the balance of of finding what's good for you, good for your clients, your
Mm.
audience, whatever it is, your community. And yeah, yeah, but it's a tricky balance.
Quick thought, then a question.
Yeah.
So, embedded within this, and this is a tiny minority of the industry that is open about their mental health, but I can think of at least two individuals who are very performative about their mental health struggles. And you can't diagnose people as being narcissists. I'm convinced both are narcissists. And they use it for status building, attention seeking. But of course, what do? They weaponize this sort of stuff to then turn around and, well, gain whatever they're looking to gain. And one, I'm not going to say names, but some people know, turned out has been credibly accused of a lot of sexual assaults. Um, the people in the industry who know who I'm referring to. I'm not going to make any specific, these are accusations, nothing's been proven in court. But when you have individuals operating like that, who I think are actually soulless, self-aggrandizing figures, I think it can make it just a little bit harder for someone to actually feel safe authentically. And again, I'm very clear, these are the rare minority, but they exist.
Yeah.
Now, the question that may or may not tie in, what do you say to someone? And I think this is probably men are fearful of this more than women. I think women it could apply to as well, who are fearful about being vulnerable for fear that what they share, personal stuff, mental health stuff, would be weaponized against them later.
Yeah, I think That's a good question. And I think you're right. It's mental health is one of those things. It's easy to um it's it's easy to prey on people with it, right? Because
Mm,
there's not a lot of there's not there's first of all there's no outward appearance, right, with mental health. So it's hard to identify. It's hard to prove or disprove. And then the other thing is because I believe there's always going to be, let's call them snakes. There's going to be snakes in everything. And there's
mm,
there's going to be those people who take advantage of every you could take any, just like mental health, you could take any disease or health issue, and there will be people taking advantage of that thing, right? There's so I think that to me, there's always going to be that. And maybe I'm so naive to think this, but I do think um authenticity is maybe I am naive to think this because I feel I can sense authenticity, right? I guess people are great actors, and like you said, social media gives everyone a really great stage for these incredible performances. But I guess my answer is that they exist in with everything. So, you wouldn't, if you had, another, any disease, right? You wouldn't you wouldn't hold back on sharing your story if it could help someone just because there are other snakes, taking advantage of it, right? I guess that would be my answer.
maybe a good analogy is these rare but occasional and high profile people who fake having cancer
Answer.
for
That's what I was going to say.
donations. And they happen, they exist, we know that they do. However, the monumental majority of people who are
Right.
dealing with cancer battles, it's a very real documentable thing. So I think with the weaponized side, I'm thinking maybe more, all right, there's a bit of a cliche, a bit of a trope, but I think oftentimes men will think that, women will say they want them to be more open and more emotional, more vulnerable, but then men are fearful that whatever comes out of there will actually be punished and it will be weaponized later on when maybe women really don't want men to be as vulnerable. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because
I know exactly what.
I feel this personally, absolutely.
Yeah.
Would I say that I hold some fear on that? Absolutely.
I think this is a balance, and I hope I'm not poor
Speak freely.
getting thrown into the fire here. But I think you hit the nail on the head for me, and I mean, again, personal experience here. Um, Men aren't talkers. And I hope I'm not like, but Keith has
Speak
come to
freely. Yeah.
okay, Keith has come to therapy with me, right? And it's more for me, I think you're 100% right that women want communication. This is my interpretation. Communication, not necessarily pouring of hearts.
Mm, mm,
And that's the difference because I'm gonna get real. Okay. You're right that women don't want they want someone they can, I don't know, I don't want to speak for all women. I personally
mm.
want someone like someone strong, someone I can rely on, someone I know. That doesn't mean they can't have issues. It doesn't mean they can't get sick, have, mental health crisis, anything like that.
You were married to an NHL goalie. Okay, I'm gonna like for the people who don't know goalies. Number one, this man stands in front of wearing like some body armor, like 100 mile an hour vulcanized rubber being shot at him like a missile. Okay, that's one. Two, goalies are notoriously squirrely, unique personalities. Okay, now I'm having a bit of fun. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, they're weirdos. They're totally weirdos. But you're right. He's like, and this is something I've had to work through because he will process things so much faster than I
Mm,
do, right? He has to. He has been trained since, I mean, he started playing hockey at 3, 4 years old and has done that his entire life. It's the only thing he knows. And so he has to process things, issues that happen on the ice in the game, things that happen. He processes things really, really quickly and then gets over them. And so I had to learn that that processing was happening at a completely, like, we wouldn't talk about things because he had already like processed everything in his own brain and had gone through it and solved the issue and had moved on, right? So, and I didn't need to necessarily have him like take me through a tutorial of that process, right? I just needed to know what was happening, right? I needed to know that he had already processed that. And for me, I'm sitting there like, spinning the spinning the wheels, like what's going on, whatever it is. And it took us learning that it took the communication to learn that, just that amount of openness, to learn that difference in how we process issues, problems, obstacles, whatever it is. And so I think for him, it was having to be open, but it took him having the openness wasn't necessarily, again, pouring out his feelings and all his, I'm not, like childhood trauma, whatever it is. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. I needed to know what was happening in real time, and it took him being able to talk to me about how he processes that in order to get there, right? So the openness isn't necessarily always talking through every single thing. It's understanding how the other person, for us anyway, it's understanding how the other person is processing that thing. And
Be more
so
open to communicate underlying basic.
the other person is more like, do you know what I mean? And we're not, like, for the record, we're not perfect. Like
Hmm.
he's probably sitting downstairs being like, what she did? But it's for me, you're right. He has had a career in which
Hmm.
mental health has obviously played a role.
Hmm.
And I think any professional athlete, I would love for more professional athletes to talk about their mental health.
Hmm.
Um, because I think for them there is that little bit of um there's pressure. There is more pressure,
Hmm.
but it's deeply tied to contract. Right? No one's gonna give a contract to someone who's like,
Well,
going, ape shit every Saturday, or losing their mind on Twitter or whatever, right? So,
there was a successful NHL goalie, Robin Lerner, I think it's pronounced, and he was quite out there about his mental health stuff, and he was with the Vegas Golden Knights for a while, and
know that.
he, yeah, you may find it enjoyable to look into that. I mean, I have a bias, and I'll get off the hockey thing, and I've got another question for you, but I like the old school guys like Ron Hextall and Billy Smith, and their way of dealing with stuff on the ice was if a forward came in their crease, they would hit them with the stick. They were absolute maniacs. I love goalie fights. Give me video of goalie fights all day long. I'm a happy person. Patrick Waugh was an absolute lunatic. It was great. Okay, now pivoting. Uh, how tangible has fitness been for your mental health?
Entirely dependent. Entirely dependent. I would argue that fitness has saved me on many levels, even from childhood. That is why my parents had me
Mm,
go into so many team sports and had me active. Um, just not just from the social aspect, that was a big part of it, right? Having friends and being social, but also they saw how much happier I was when I was active, and that has carried through my entire life. My entire life since then. I have noticed, and I talk about this, I might have talked about this last time or on the other podcast, but
mm,
the lowest I've ever been was in law school. And it was because I had just left St. FX, where I was student athlete. That was my identity. I was, a little pat on the back here, but I was an academic all Canadian. That was what
mm.
I did, was school and sports. And when I went to law school, I lost all of that. And I ended up just doing what law students do. And that included a lot of drinking and other unmentionable items. Yeah,
Mm,
no, that was the lowest. That was the lowest for me. And it was um, directly tied to not doing. I mean, I'm sure there are other factors there, but I do attribute not having scheduled exercise in my day-to-day life as the reason for that. I also know for a fact that when I started exercising again, that is when I started to climb back up. And so I have noticed consistently in my life, my mental health is directly tied to my exercise routine, regardless of what it was. When I first started getting back into it, um, I was still in, yeah, I was still in I was still in the legal world, and I started hot yoga. That's how I started. Hot yoga was
Mm.
all the craze at the time, and that's how I started going. But and that's why I always say you'll like, it doesn't matter what type of movement, right? I mean, at this point in the game, I'm a hypertrophy girl. I'm all about
Mm.
building strength.
Mm.
But if it's for mental health, any movement matters. Any movement matters. Like get up and go for a walk, go outside, get out of your own head, get out of your own space. Any kind of movement is the key to mental health, in my opinion.
Is that also part of your strategy when you don't have your ideal situation where you can get to the gym on your routine, especially if you're traveling?
100%. And thank you for asking because I feel like I have a lot of clients who travel, and I
Mm.
actually have traveled a lot in my life. I move a lot. Keith is all over the place. So there is often times that I don't have a set gym, right? There are often times that I don't have a routine. And you know, instead of being like, oh, I don't have a gym, I don't have this, I can't do it. No, I figure out, okay, I can walk, right? I'll figure out where I can walk. I always travel with resistance bands, always.
Mm.
So that's the other thing. So I'll always have that. I know yoga, like I have my yoga cert, right? So I can do that. But I also, obviously I'm a professional, so I have accumulated these tools, but going to YouTube and following something there, being resourceful and finding a way to move your body is always going to beat doing nothing.
Mm.
That's what it comes down to for me. So it's make it happen regardless, you
And for
know.
everybody listening, do not assume that just because we are experienced fitness professionals, we all are great at being adaptable in fitness. I tend to like having my routine work out the way I want to work out. I don't necessarily go outside of that very well. I recently had a 10-day trip. The first couple days, if I'm speaking at an event, I'm walking a ton. So I also have a narrative being like, that's actually pretty good. I also value the social time with friends in the industry, like when we were at Swiss, right? That stuff's great. That's net positive for our health. When I was in Newfoundland with family in between, there's a good life there. I work out at them. It's got all the same equipment, whatever. I was completely on track. Then I go down to Austin, Texas for a couple days. And one of the events one day was at a gym. So cool. I get to work out there, but I also walked around a lot. And, but at the same time, for me to proactively, I'd have to plan ahead, but proactively go out of my way to include alternative forms of fitness other than walking, I find it hard. Could I travel with bands and have them in a suitcase and do it in a hotel room? I know me well enough to know that I would struggle with that. That's a narrative and it's rigid thinking. You have to be careful about that. But I also know me that I would never do it. Let's call a spade a spade. I wouldn't do it. Okay.
Yeah, and I want to talk about this because
Mm.
I would argue most people who are very consistent with their training do have a set routine
Mm.
like you, right? And I would also say, like you, if I lived like you and didn't travel as much as I do,
Mm.
I probably also would take those days off. Do you know what I'm
Mm.
saying here? And I think I did a post on this a couple weeks ago because during the summer, a lot of my clients are traveling, right? For me, if you're going away for 3 or 4 days, go away for 3 or 4 days. You
Mm.
don't need a modified workout or anything like that. Work out before, move your workouts around, get them in after, right? You don't need a resist special travel workout or anything like that for the 3 or 4 days you're away, whatever it is. If you don't travel, every month for work, you don't need to worry about that one-off time or every couple months going away for a week take the week and chill, man. That's like what I tell my clients, especially my corporate workers who are 9 to 5ers most weeks of the year. They get 4 weeks off a year. Go off, go take the time off. Nothing is going to, you're not going to impact your strength gains, your your muscle gains in that short time off because they are so consistent the other, 48 weeks of the year, right? So I think I love that you said that because I do want to clarify that that's the only time I do that is when I'm traveling. If I'm traveling for a month, right? Living out of a suitcase, then yeah, I'm gonna do what I have to do. But if you're going away for a week on vacation and you only get so much vacation a year, you don't travel that much, you have a really consistent schedule like you do, go enjoy the vacay.
Same attitude. And that's what I tell clients too. Okay, so you were getting a bunch of messages from your clients. I guess there was some post, and I don't know who the girl is, some fitness professional influencer, and she's got a really, athletically built physique, but she's doing Pilates. So, the question is, should I be doing Pilates in order to get the physique of that Pilates practitioner?
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, Andrew, that post backfired so badly because then I had like
Oh,
10 more clients ask me about it.
whoops.
But no, I know, right? My own fault. But yes, so I really wanted to talk about, first of all, she looks fantastic.
Mm,
Nothing about the way she looks, but a lot of women will see her physique and think, I am going to follow her workouts in order to look like that. And my biggest issue with it is that you will not look like that. She has massive quads, even in the sculpted, leaned out, right? Like I mean, unreal quads, like envy here, like, but she has massive quads, massive delts. That is not possible with Pilates. And that was what my issue was, right? I don't want women thinking, and especially my girls thinking, "Oh my God, I have to change my entire regime here to look like that." No, 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 no. Most women still have a lot of muscle to build. She also built that muscle. I had to do a little more digging. She's
mm,
like 19 years old, 20 years old or something, right? So so she is so easy to she's in that peak period for muscle building. So even if she only spent a year or two, it might be possible to build that level of muscle in that time period, right?
mm,
So I'm trying to tell my 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old clients, you still need to build muscle, right?
mm,
If you enjoy Pilates, that's totally different. Go enjoy the Pilates. I like I said, I enjoy yoga, I enjoy cycling, I enjoy many
mm,
forms of fitness, but use the form of fitness for the desired result.
mm.
And Pilates, the goal of Pilates is not hypertrophy. So if you want to build muscle, Pilates is going to be a frustrating path to try to do that with. And that's what it comes down to, right?
I look at yoga and Pilates are not the same thing, but they're probably close enough in the way I'm going to frame it. I'm very pro yoga. I know less about Pilates. I have an idea. First of all, I think yoga is a fantastic complement to resistance training because I think it's great for mobility. I think it's great for down-regulating a parasympathetic nervous system tone. It's great for de-stressing. I got brought to a yoga class once. Yes, I was trying to impress a beautiful young woman.
That's gonna
I did.
ask.
I didn't do badly, but there were definitely some things that I wasn't strong enough. Now, I didn't have the motor skill, but also there's certain things I physically couldn't do. There's a lot of what we'll call, there's also different kinds of yoga. There's some gentle stretching, but there's also some positions or whatever that are literally progressive, isometric body weight things that are challenging. So in some of those things, there's enough stimulus to actually build muscle and strength. Now, I think the issue with yoga and Pilates is there are limits to how most of it can scale with resistance. And especially if someone is quite strong, quite experienced with the stuff, and pretty conditioned towards it versus someone who's coming in, doesn't work out, they're very deconditioned, they find a basic yoga class really hard. Fuck, that's great for you. Like, Jesus, that's probably right where you need to be.
Yeah, right where you need it, 100%. Yep.
But it doesn't scale very well to be an optimal, and I'm paraphrasing you, an optimal thing to build muscle, build and preserve bone mineral density as we get older. So I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but to agree with you, I do. If someone is doing that and only that, they're probably going to be very healthy. But for certain goals, it's not the best tool.
That's exactly what it all comes down to. And I have so many, I live in this community. It's a great little community down here on Long Island, but most of my neighbors are in their, in their 70s or older. And it's, they just walking, right? If that's all you can do, like you said, the yoga, it's good. You're going to be able to maintain health. But if you have, maintain health. But if you have specific goals, right? And this is where most women, at least most women coming to me, most women have very specific goals. They want defined arms. They want lifted glutes. They want tight legs. They want abs. I mean, on the aesthetic, and let's just, I'm very pretty blunt person, but very bluntly, people want to look toned. They want to look, tight, defined. And if you want that, there is a a known, researched, proven way to do that.
Mm.
It's not like we don't know what to do to get those, to get those results. So for me, it's kind of just repeating that. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here with hypertrophy training, but still some, I still get asked, should I be doing this instead? No, like hypertrophy, progressive overload. I know it's boring, but the boring stuff gets shit done. That's what we need to do, and it's how we do it forever, Like it's you can't, and I love the whole high rocks thing, it's great, right? You can't train like that year round though. You can't train like there's a reason pro athletes have an off season, right? You can't push your body to that capacity the whole time. And so I don't know where I was going off on a tangent there, but I think it's the strength and hypertrophy thing is something you can do forever and stay healthy with it, um, be consistent with it. You can maintain muscle with just like 2 workouts a week, right? 2, 3 workouts a week. So yeah, it's one of those things that's just it's doable forever.
I just thought of something, and I think this is probably comfortable to say it's true. It's easier to objectively measure progress with strength training versus most other forms of fitness. Now, I think endurance work and timing and performance, something like a high rocks, absolutely very objectively measurable. But try objectively measuring your progress on yoga. Try measuring Pilates progress. My guess is it probably, I don't think they're meant that way, but I think it's probably
No data.
harder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're right. You're right. That's probably the culture of those styles of training is not that, right? They don't want that data around there.
It's
But there is no data. All there are images of how we can see a person getting into the position, right? Or how they look in that position. So I guess objectively, if you want to look at that, there's that kind of progress we can measure. But
yeah.
in terms of like strength or health markers, not really.
I mean, people are more mobile, they feel better, all amazing stuff. Hard to measure and quantify. And I think being able to measure the fact that, oh, I lifted more than last week, I did more reps at the same weight than last week. Hey, this is all written down and chartable. That stuff keeps people in the game, and I think it's great for consistency. So, all
And
right,
that's what we
another. Oh,
balance. I just wanted to say, like, that's important. That's why we have our strength system and our strength markers within Team Strong Girls and for my clients, is because while most people come to us for the aesthetics, you have to create the strength goals as well, right? Because long term, they go back and forth, Even for me, and I'm speaking again, personal experience, even I have back and forth, right? I started this year out, I'm like, I'm gonna get a bunch of pull-ups, right? I wanted to get a
mm,
bunch of pull-ups. That was my thing. And then I had an opportunity come up where I had to lean out. So it went to aesthetics, right? And then I went back and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get like I want to nail
mm,
my squat now. And so it's going back and forth and kind of knowing how to chase whatever's making you excited about training, and that's what I try to tell my clients, like whatever's making you excited to go to the gym, go work out, get your training done. That's what we should focus on. And it's going to change. It's going to change, and that's a good thing. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
One more thing that you were riffing on your social media I enjoyed. So, fitness influencers who create fear around GLP-1 agonist medications. And I think that actually both sides of the, let's call it the ideological spectrum on this one, are pissing me off because I think they're both gatekeeping in different ways. I think both are afraid of losing status because they're afraid that all of these people will no longer need them, their narratives. And you definitely were not, there's something I saw, you wanted people to, oh yeah, you had an issue with people who are promoting their programs, who are using GLP-1 agonist medications, but they are not open about them using them. So fire
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, I have a big issue with that actually,
Mm,
Andrew. Thanks for providing me with this soapbox. No,
mm,
I'm to me, I feel authenticity is really important. Feel being open about how you are achieving something, how you are doing something, that is important to share so that other people don't get discouraged or think less of themselves, feel isolated. I do think that's important for humanity. I'm getting too deep here. Um, but when someone such as a coach who is specifically in a position who owes a fiduciary duty to in my opinion, their clients, for sure, their clients, people paying them. But then beyond that, even their audience and community, they owe those people they owe them that authenticity of being open and honest about how they are achieving their results. Because I always think about Legally Blonde, right? When she's like getting liposuction, right? She's the girl. You probably don't remember it, right? But the
too
defendant,
long ago. Yeah.
right? The defendant is she's a fitness trainer and she's getting liposuction, and that was the whole thing, right? Like she couldn't come out and like let anyone know. Hilarious comparison, but to me it is similar. You can't be selling a
Mm,
product and a service saying this is how you achieve that using their own physiques, using their own bodies, right? That
that's a
is the key.
key.
That's the
That's a
key.
key.
Sorry, I didn't touch on that. Using their own physiques to sell this, that is slimy, in my opinion. That's sorry, too aggressive. I could be more
No,
aggressive.
no, no, no,
Okay,
no,
because
not at all.
it's lying. It's lying. Like, let's
Mm.
just call a spade a spade. That's lying. Is it, that's my opinion.
And this ties into what I was saying about both sides of the spectrum gatekeeping this stuff. And I recall recently Jordan Syatt, who's been a guest on the podcast, who's great as a friend, he had announced he did an experiment where he used GLP-1s for a month. And I think his rationale was just to kind of do them and understand them. And I think that ties into this Dr. Mike Isertel, who's also been on semi recently. He has talked very openly about all of the promising stuff that I keep hearing about and again, I'm not great with the research on this, but I'm going to trust that, well, Mike's wife, Dr. Crystal Guevara, who's a friend and been on the podcast, talk about GLP-1s. If Mike is talking waffle about GLP-1s, Crystal's probably going to sit there and smack him in the side of the head. And if he keeps talking about this stuff, my guess is he's probably knows something about this stuff. Crystal would set him straight. And as I understand it, there are people who are using GLP-1 agonist medications that are helping their relationship with alcoholism is somehow like way better, smoking, other addictive behaviors, other maladaptive shit in life. And I see, the empathetic side of the industry really police the usage of GLP-1s, agonist medications that must be restricted only to people who are pre-diabetic and diabetic. And as I understand the research, there are broader, more promising implications. And I actually think that the side that are fight policing what people say and do, and mad with Syed and mad with what Mike was saying, are as bad as the other side of the spectrum that are just pissed off because now your unique body status symbol thing might get watered down because you're afraid everybody's going to look like that. When the real underlying issue, and I'd love to hear your last thoughts in the last few minutes, is most of these people aren't going to be doing what matters the most, which is working out, building muscle.
Yeah,
So,
100%. Like that's what it comes down to is I am not going anywhere. I'm always my job is to help women
mm,
build muscle, and GLP-1s don't do that, right?
mm,
And GLP-1s in fact uh, indicate people who are on them should be resistance training
mm.
more than, I mean, everyone should be resistance training in my opinion, but if someone is on a GLP-1, they absolutely need to be resistance training. Absolutely. So the way I see it, it doesn't impact me, what I do at all, in any way, shape, or form. So I don't understand. I know what you mean. Those people, they're loony to me. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're not going to put you out of a business. If you're teaching people how to eat and train properly, there's no pill that can do that, right? Or injection. There's nothing that can replace that. So to those people, like, yeah, obviously just think they don't understand or don't have a great approach to fitness. I hate to say it. And then, yeah, like you said, everyone being on it. I'll give a shout out to my assistant, who's also, she's a genius. She runs a bariatric clinic, but she always says if the patient is indicated for it, then they're indicated for it, whatever the indication is, right?
Mm.
So to your point, if there's research coming out, it impacts all these, not just food noise, but potential addiction stuff, right? Then that should be that then that could be an indication and that should be researched, right? I think that's what it comes down to. If someone is indicated for a medication, then I am for that medication. I'm not for chasing random
Mm.
products and services on the internet and social media being promoted through online rent like questionable sources and fake pharmacies. And I don't know if you guys have as much up there in Canada, but down here in the US it's like rampant, right?
Well, the US is one of only two countries, the other being New Zealand, that allows pharmaceutical advertising on television. And I will die on this hill. The US should ban that shit, right?
Yeah, we
For real.
talked
Get
about
rid of
this
it.
on our Zoom call today, on our
Yeah.
team call today. I talked about
That's
it
not a
was
thing in
wild.
Canada.
It
Yeah.
boggled my mind the first time I started watching when I was down here watching TV. And you don't really notice it when you're just vacationing here, but when you
Mm.
start living here and you're like watching, you have the TV on and it's literally ad after ad for Wegovy, Semelgitude, Ozempic, whatever it is, right? Or whatever. I don't even know if I said that second one right, but every single thing is about weight loss, pharmacy, medical, health. There's commercials.
Lipitor, Cialis, you name it, all this
Oh
shit.
my God. Oh my
The
God.
parallel I've seen is anytime I'm in the US, Florida for sure is the worst I've seen this. You're driving around. Every second billboard is for like injury
Attorney.
law.
You know,
And
I was gonna
that
say attorney.
fucking as a Canadian, sorry for my American friends, that shit freaks me out because it's such a there are subcultural differences and what is like the litigious nature of
That
Americans versus
is a
Canadians is a
cultural
thing.
shock. It's an
Ooh.
absolute cultural shock the first time you see a commercial for a hospital. Like, right? Like a
Mm,
hospital. Why does a hospital need to make itself seem better, right? Like we're only going
mm.
there if we're seriously, like if we seriously need to go there. So that to me was wild, but it's because it's a business and there's many hospitals in business, right? So there's options to choose from, which as a patient, there's a good and I mean it's a double-edged sword there, right? As you know.
We're going to make sure people go follow you before we piss off all of my American friends and listeners here. I love you guys. I seriously do. So thanks for indulging a couple of Canadians in our like mysticism over some of the cultural differences. Okay, everybody can follow you. So you got one of these um Instagram handles that is screwy to me. So I'm okay.
Ever
It's at JAQIOH. Okay. So I don't even want to know how do you say that? Jackie O? Is that
Heck
it?
yo, that's
Jackie
it.
O.
Yeah,
Okay.
you
All
nailed
right.
it. And I literally made it when I was still in law school, guys.
Mm.
And I just left it because I don't know why. Everyone keeps telling me to change it. Maybe I will someday, but at this point, we're what, like 15 years in here. I don't think
Uh,
I don't know.
what else do you want to direct people to?
That's it, guys. Find me on Instagram, really. That's my place. That's where I hang out. I'm not too much anywhere else. Not on X or Facebook or anything like that. So come hit me up on Instagram. Shoot me a message, like Andrew said, Jaqioh, Jackie O. And yeah, just shoot me a message. I try to take after Andrew and get back to everyone
Mhm.
promptly, but still not as good as Andrew. Sorry.
And speaking of, if you guys are enjoying this and you've not yet ever messaged me, I want to hear from you. Send me a message. Just let me know you listen to it. Share it on your story. Tag me in it. I will reply. I would love to hear from you guys. I would love feedback because that helps me want to keep doing this stuff and keeps my sponsors happy. So obviously, shout out to my sponsors. You've been hearing the ads for these things, so it's exciting to have them. Working on some new ones. We'll see what happens. Jackie, your joy. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, guys.